One of the number one predictors of burnout is compromising your values. And it's also one of the top elements of human flourishing. So if you're regularly going to work and feeling like you have to compromise your values, and especially if one of your values is like family and spending time with people that you love, and then you become a workaholic to the point where you're neglecting your family and you're espousing one thing, but then your actions don't actually align with the things that you say are most important in life, your soul, like the inside of your entire being, knows that you are compromising that. And that's where burnout and unfulfillment and all these other things come into play, that people don't really understand the core root cause of why they're feeling so disconnected.
Welcome to Wealth Coherence. I'm your host, Emily Bouchard, a social worker specializing in human development and fascinated by human potential. For over 20 years, I've been a coach to families with successful businesses and leaders with successful careers. And you may be surprised to learn that true wealth is about coherence. When our inner state of being aligns with how we live, give, lead, and love. In this series, we will explore an integrated model to flourish coherently, because wealth isn't what we have, it's who we are when we are fully aligned. Well, welcome to this edition of Wealth Coherence. I am so thrilled to get to introduce you all to a new and wonderful friend, Meghan French Dunbar. And she and I met in San Diego when we were doing our TEDx talks earlier in September. And I was blown away by her talk, by her and the story, and really wanted to dive in today with Meghan around how we define success and what really leads to a coherent experience of success in our lives. So let's start off with if somebody wanted to understand you and your definition of success and how you came to come to it, that'd be great to get to know you from that lens.
Oh, wow. Starting off with the big question. Yeah, I would say at this point in my life, my definition of success is very much having enough while doing work that has meaning, that I'm passionate about, working with people I love, and optimizing my quality of life along the way, which quality of life markers for me, mental and physical health. Am I doing things regularly that make me happy and joyful? Do I have plenty of time to spend with the people that I love? It's changed a lot over time, but right now I think those are the things that I focus on most.
Yeah, I love starting from this place in terms of present time, who you are now. Your story around launching a print magazine and having it end up in like Whole Foods markets with your first edition is quite extraordinary. And a lot of people would say, oh my gosh, that's like the pinnacle of success. And that wasn't part of what you just described. So maybe you could share a little bit about your journey that got you to here and how you've come to really redefine that for yourself.
Sure. Yeah. And this was something that I talked about a bit in my TED Talk, but I grew up very similar to a lot of people I know, just a high achiever from the get-go. I had an older brother and I was very competitive and just constantly chasing in his footsteps. And that was both academically and in soccer, basketball, sports, like everything I did. I was just trying to prove myself and win all the awards and get the grades. And I didn't know who I was in the absence of achievement. And it just kept going. I did my undergraduate degrees and did an MBA with a focus on sustainability. And then my first entrepreneurial endeavor, we crowdfunded a print magazine about sustainable or impact-driven business. And that first issue did get picked up by every Whole Foods in the nation with issue number 1, January 1st, 2015. It's called Conscious Company Magazine. And so it felt very successful, and it had all of the extrinsic markers of success, of achievement, and my ego felt great. And we did the whole entrepreneur's journey of raising capital. I had 21 impact investors on my cap table. We sold the company in 2017. I stayed on as CEO for a few years after that. We were hosting events and standing ovations, and I was a keynote speaker all over the place. But behind the scenes, I was chronically stressed and depressed and very rarely happy. But one, I was kind of too busy to notice. But anytime I'd slow down any of the busyness, I was like kind of looking around being like, am I doing this wrong? Am I missing something? I don't understand. Like, I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do, and I don't feel genuinely happy or fulfilled. I actually feel fairly miserable. So yeah, I ended up coming back from my first maternity leave in the end of 2019. And when I got back, I felt so physically and mentally depleted that I resigned as CEO for my own company in February of
Mhm.
2020. And in
Oh,
March
wow.
was COVID. And
Timing. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
as that time was for a lot of people, it was a forced
Yeah.
pause for me. And
Mhm.
during that time, just tons of exploration, therapy, trying to figure out what was next, if I could come back to work in a good way. And that led me to an entire book project of interviewing people that I'd found who seemed to be flourishing or thriving in their careers
Mhm.
and had some sort of kind of traditional marker of success, authors, business leaders, etc., and what they were doing differently. And that kind of shaped where I am today. But that is a long backstory, and happy to go into any of it further, but I'll stop there.
Well, that's an important backstory too. I think it's really important to understand a journey that leads somebody to completely shift their definition of success when they've been so, like you said, externally motivated, right? How am I being perceived externally, and am I getting that feedback? And it's so important right now more than ever in terms of how do you have that internal guidance
Uh-huh.
system that has that coherence with our values and our true purpose, that has that depth of fulfillment no matter what it is that we find ourselves called to do.
Uh-huh.
And I love it if you could share a little bit about the book and the research and the data. I mean, that, yeah, I don't want to do a spoiler alert because your TED Talk's
No, no.
awesome and it gives a lot of the details, and it's great to listen to the talk, and you're really a great speaker. That, the fact that you had access to all of these different leaders and successful people that have also figured out a way to do it in a way that was really coherent or is like supporting them in all aspects of their lives. That's what this whole conversation's about. So, like,
Yeah,
and maybe what you applied in your own life towards that.
of course. Yeah, it was.
Mhm.
I mean, I, of course, was looking for leadership strategies and workplace culture practices that people were doing. And I found a lot of common denominator issues that people were doing that were making them feel better or making their workplaces thrive and flourish. And this other element that I found was a mindset shift around how they thought about success. So the people who I found who are really flourishing had taken that kind of traditional idea of success based on achievement and money and wealth and status and title, all the extrinsic markers, and they had kind of just shoved it away. They didn't care about it. And in its place, they prioritized intrinsically motivating factors. And this is something that Daniel Pink wrote about in his book Drive. And he talked about it very much through the lens of like, how do you motivate your workforce or your team by tapping into intrinsic motivation? And I started seeing that these same intrinsically motivating factors, which are having purpose and meaning, feeling like you're growing, learning, like you're mastering something that you care about, and having autonomy, freedom, voice, choice, all the things. Um, if you apply those to your own concept of success, that was what I was starting to see was common amongst all of the people I was interviewing who seemed really happy. And so that just, the further I pulled on that thread, the more evidence there was behind it. That one of the pieces of information I didn't have in my TED Talk, so this will be new, was research that was done. I think this was by Edward Deasy, where they looked at college students who one group had revolved their idea of success around extrinsically motivating factors, the traditional ones of achievement, wealth, status. And the other group was defining success by intrinsically motivating factors. They looked at these students for way further out in their career. They followed up with them, and regardless of the level of success they had achieved, the extrinsically motivating group had stagnant levels of life satisfaction, pretty much the exact same that they had in college, they had later in life, and they had increased levels of depression, stress, and anxiety. The intrinsically motivated group, people who were pursuing their purpose, their passion, things that they wanted to learn more about, all of the intrinsic markers, they had increased levels of life satisfaction and decreased levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. And so this correlated with Harvard's human Flourishing
Oh, yeah.
program, which I talked
Mhm.
about in the TEDx, where they're clear on the 5 core elements of human flourishing. Like, they know what they are. They
Right.
are having purpose and meaning, which is one of our intrinsically motivating factors, feeling aligned with your values, so not compromising your values or your character, feeling joy and satisfaction, which very much aligns with the growth and mastery. Like when you're doing something that you love to do and you're learning more and more about something you care about, it gives you deep levels of satisfaction, and then mental and physical health and deep, meaningful social connections, which very much align with having the freedom to pursue things that bring you quality of life. And so these are all of these aha moments as I was going through. And this
Mm.
wasn't like overnight. This was, years of writing this book and connecting the dots, but I got pretty clear on the fact that if I continued to solely focus my idea of success on what I had always done, that I would, in fact, never really get to a place where I felt
Mhm.
fulfilled or happy or felt like I was actually healthy and thriving. And it is not an overnight process. It's not like I flipped a switch. It is hard to
Mhm.
deprogram yourself from lifetimes of conditioning. And the more that I've really just focused on intrinsically motivating factors, the happier, healthier I felt in my life. So,
Yeah, it's interesting when you're describing that. I think the values piece is so key, right? I work with a lot of families where we take time to explore, like, what are the family's core values? And one of my favorite aspects of that work is then having them observe each other in terms of what is it I see about you that really exemplifies that value in your life?
what a
And
good
where do I
practice.
really see that showing up, right? I was just listening to a recent interview with Brene Brown on the 10% Happier podcast. And she was saying that when their work with values, they make sure that how are you operationalizing it, right? Like, what are the observable, measurable standards you're using to look at, are we living and fulfilling our values in the work that we're doing in our lives, in our family, and every aspect of it. And starting off this conversation and asking you how you define success, it was all values focused, right? And like, I could get a sense of your values based on, like, spending time with family. Family must be one of your core values, right? And, like, your health and vitality, and, like, what are the things you're doing on a daily basis to really focus on that? And the more we can uh, measure that and look at it in terms of our lives, the more we are likely to actually have that intrinsic sense of satisfaction. And
Yeah.
um, I think the other person that comes to mind is Marty Seligman and his work in positive psychology. And
Mhm.
he was one of my professors at Penn when I was an undergrad,
Oh,
and at the
cool.
time, he was really focused on depression as being learned helplessness, and then he realized he was getting more and more depressed studying it, and he thought, "Wait, wait, if I can learn this, then maybe I can learn the opposite, which would be, like, learned optimism." And so he started doing a ton of research on that, and it totally correlates with the Harvard study as well. And it's all about how do we flourish in our lives. And he's done a whole bunch of work around values too, and he has like a tome, a huge book on values. It's fantastic. So I think I'd love to hear more from you in terms of, like, if I was sitting at the dinner table with you and your family and your little ones, and, like, what do you think your children would say are the core values of your family that you guys really embody and
Oh, that's a
exemplify?
great question. I have so much. Well, one, I'll come back to that, but one thing that came up for me. So we used to, with my team at Conscious Company Media, we had this great practice where, because I found a lot of companies, espouse their values, they put them on a poster
Mhm.
on the wall, and then they never come back to them again. When you're talking about Brene Brown, talking about like how are you operationalizing this? But so we had our core values, which we developed with the entire team. All of us were in the workshop to do it. And I had a small company. So, but all 8 of us were in the room and we came up with our values and we had sentence stems like, just what would it look like for this to be in practice? And so we really
Mhm.
got clear on that. And then every Friday we had an all staff meeting and it started by saying, we did a high-low check-in on the company values.
Oh,
And
I
it
love
was
that.
it was like totally optional, but most people participated. And it was either a high would be one value you felt through the week that you were like, I nailed this and I really embodied it this week, or where you fell short, and
Mhm.
which was also really important to acknowledge. And part of that, as a leader, I would be very transparent and vulnerable when I fell short of one of our company values, like talking to a vendor or something. But then we also then took that and started every Monday doing the same thing, but for our personal values. And
Oh,
so really
wow.
helping everyone, get clear on what their personal values are, and then
Mhm.
helping hold each other accountable to our own personal values, which didn't have to be the same. And so I'm very clear on my values. I have them quite literally. I can pull it. I have them taped on a sticky note inside. This is my son's my son. This is saying, "I love you so
This
much,"
is
but mine are in
great.
this. But impact, exploration, love, joy, and authenticity are the ones that I come back to. But to your question, what would you say our family values are? And
Yes.
that I think that there's a few that, I mean, my kids are 3 and 6, so they'd be like spaghetti, but I think love and joy are like two things that regularly come up that are both my personal values, but I would say very much are the family values. There's just a tremendous amount of joy and love in the house. And um, also, I feel like there's some element of, what would I put the word as? Like growth, like learning together and supporting each other
Mhm.
through like helping each other learn more about each other and being each other's mirrors, both for our kids and my partner and I. But I love my business partner, Nathan Havey. He and his kids are a little bit older, but they came up with their family values as a family and they regularly talk about it. And I think it's something that very few people do. And when you're like, you talk to someone, you say, "What do you think your core values are?" Almost everyone says something about like family. And then you're like, okay, and then
One.
what?
Yes,
And then they're
exactly.
like, oh, like everyone kind of thinks you know what they are. But if you ask
Mhm.
people to articulate them, it's a lot of people have a hard time. And I'm like, it's one of the best practices you can possibly do in your life is really nail what those are and figure out how to bring them to life on a regular basis.
Yeah, I worked with one family. We talked about creating their like coat of arms. Like what is it
Hmm.
they stand for? What is it that they mean? And they had little ones and they had like elementary school kids and um they had so much fun. I said, okay, everybody's going to create their own version of it and you're going to put them around the house. And one of them came back with like a fish blowing bubbles. And in each of the bubbles was one of the values. And,
I love
and then
this.
another family, they had like an entryway with a staircase that, you saw right when you came in, and they chose to paint on the riser for each of the steps,
Uh-huh.
their values in, like, really beautiful calligraphy, so it
Oh
totally
my
matched the decor, so
gosh.
that's like you're stepping towards it, you're keeping it alive that way, and it's so wonderful how you incorporate it into a conscious your magazine was totally focused on being conscious on how you do business, right? And how do you impact the world with what you're doing, right? And then to do that on a more micro level with each other and bringing your personal values to work and having that be not just invited but incorporated into your culture, that that's an extraordinary principle that, if more businesses did that, people would have a lot more work satisfaction and feel really valued and seen. I think that's the other thing
And
too is the other
yeah,
people they work with would really understand the motivations that somebody has for why or why not they're doing something.
yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's like that's one of the better ways to actually get to know somebody is have them talk about their values and how they're bringing them to life or how they're falling short of them. Our organizational culture was next level. We had a fabulous culture, but as the leader, I destroyed myself in the process to build it and very much was like self-sacrificial, but the personal and the company values, because that it also helps you understand if your personal values and the company you're working for, if those values they don't have to be, one to one match. They don't even have to like overlap too much, but if they work against each other in some way, or if you like if there's something at your company that is like you're just like I do not agree with this, one of the number one predictors of burnout is compromising your values. Like and it's
Oh,
also one of the top elements of human flourishing. So if you're regularly going to work and feeling like you have to compromise your values. And especially if one of your values is like
Yeah.
family and spending time with
Mhm.
people that you love. And then you become a workaholic to the point where you're neglecting your family and you're espousing one thing, but then your actions don't actually align with the things that you say are most important in life. Your soul, like the inside of your entire being, knows that you are compromising that. And that's where burnout and unfulfillment and all these other things come into play that people don't really understand the core root cause of why they're feeling so disconnected.
Yeah, it makes me think of one of my favorite books by Ariana Huffington called Thrive, which was about her moment of shocking awareness of what she was doing to her physical body when she
Hmm.
had quite the scary episode because she was had worked herself with so much stress and, that extrinsic motivation. And I think that's where she came up with her third metric, right? Where you're looking at what's the wisdom you're bringing to it? What's the wonder that you have in the world as you're doing what you're doing, right? Like she redefined success, and really started to shift that. And I'm not surprised that it came from a woman and that you're a woman as well. I think that there's something here. I don't know if you've explored it or if you've looked at it in terms of this, like, from through the lens that people use in terms of masculine versus feminine versus being whole in our being, as human beings. And so there's this sense of motivating extrinsic factors tend to be more presumed to be masculine in terms of that drive. Like you talked about your brother and wanting to, like, achieve. And then the feminine is more what you were describing in terms of what is it that's going to bring me that, like, sense of enduring fulfillment, like with my spending time with family and my health. And it's interesting how those are split. Did you find that these people that were happy in their roles in life and successful had more of an integrated way of
Mhm.
being with both of those?
That's funny that you mentioned that. Yes, I have an entire chapter called Holistic Leadership, which
What?
makes the argument that we are all born with the capacity to access all human character traits. And
Mhm.
because of patriarchal conditioning around what a
Society.
man's role is and what a woman's role is, we kind of took a buzzsaw down the middle and said, these are, quote, feminine traits and these are, quote, masculine traits. And many of us were raised and conditioned as young girls. Here's your doll and your kitchen set, and you need to be quiet and agreeable and don't rock the boat and, don't be too loud. Like all of these feminine traits. And the men, young boys, are conditioned to only express the, quote, masculine traits. And they're actually even really shamed often for expressing anything feminine. And so we grow up kind of in this bifurcated, women are feminine and men are masculine, when in reality, we all should be having access to all of these things.
Yeah.
And what we are finding is that so women got forced into this very masculine business world. So we had to start expressing the, quote,
Mhm.
masculine traits that we could have been doing the entire time. And now all this research around women being, quote, better leaders, it is because the best leaders in the world have a wide spectrum of, quote, masculine and feminine leadership capacities. And because women have that feminine and then they're forced to figure out the masculine, they're essentially kind of like bilingual. They speak both languages. And then now we're holding them up as better leaders when in reality it is just holistic leadership, looking at the
Mhm.
healthy character traits and not undertaking the toxic traits, not looking at them as masculine and feminine. Those tend to be the best leaders, but then they also tend to be the people who are happiest in life because they're very much, it's more of that integrated, balanced approach where they're not leaning too heavily on any one thing and they're not imbalanced because of it.
Right, and when you have that more balanced approach, you're more likely to have that sense of flourishing and well-being and health because you're not overextending one side and, to the detriment of ignoring or avoiding the other.
Yeah.
And, I think too what you were saying is there's been a lot of research around the power of empathy and vulnerability in leadership, and I was thinking about what you were saying about bringing the personal values to work, and that's a very vulnerable thing to do. A lot of people would balk at that because it's so personal. There's nothing more personal than we have than our internal belief system and our what matters most to us, which is our values.
Mhm.
And to bring that forward and make it obvious to everyone that that's who you are and what matters to you is a vulnerable thing to do. And yet that's where this flourishing of all individuals raises the whole quality of the whole experience for everyone. And it also expands our capacity to allow for those differences to be there and have them be a good thing. And then the business thrives and the family thrives when you allow for those differences to flourish as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you think about uh, the things that you discovered for yourself in terms of when you needed to shift. And it's
Hmm.
like grinding gears, right? When you go from hugely, achievement oriented to there's got to be another way. There's this gap moment in life of total uncertainty and needing to redefine your identity and wondering if you can share anything about what supported you. You said you did all kinds of different things, but what did you draw from the most that really allowed you to embody this whole new way of being?
Therapy. um, Underline therapy. And also, I mean, I have little practices that I try to use to really
Mhm.
support this kind of way of being, because I feel very clear on, in terms of my purpose or meaning, what is a huge problem that you are driven to solve that, often is, I feel there's a difference between having purpose in your career and really pursuing the purpose that lights you up. And
Mhm.
I am so deeply passionate about changing the way that we work and changing the way that we're thinking about doing business and showing that there's a better way to do business, because there's so many statistics showing how incredibly unhealthy the way that we're currently working is. It's quite literally killing people. And
Mhm.
so I have, when my in my little like purpose thing, I have a little Google folder that anytime someone sends me a note or says something about how my work has impacted them, or I
Mhm.
read this thing and it inspired me to do this, I like take a little screenshot and I keep it in this folder. And when I feel, I mean, I just launched a book 2 months ago. Like, talk about feeling the temptation to get sucked back into the extrinsically motivating, achievement oriented. There's all these, you want to try to be on the bestsellers list and you need to sell so many copies and you want to try to get so many speaking gigs. And it's so kind of numbers focused and award and achievement focused. And every time I was getting almost sucked into that, I'd like pull up my little Google folder and be like, this is what matters. This, like, the why behind what I'm doing, the deeper why. Like, is there a tangible way to keep coming back to that? Has been one of my practices. And I've set like very clear time boundaries
Mhm.
on, and I'm a solopreneur. I work for myself, so I can do this. I'm a consultant, author. I set my own hours, but I stop every day at 2:30 and I pick up my kids and I hang out with my kids every afternoon, and I limit my work travel, and I like have my little daily practices for mental and physical health, and
Mhm.
making those habits instead of things that I try to squeeze in the time for, putting those as the priority and not making work my number one priority.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's hard to do, and it is very much, or at least like valuing them equally. And not my family, but like my family is number one always, but like the supportive behaviors that I have
Mhm.
around my joy, my mental health, my physical health, all of those things, is not seeing them as optional has been a huge difference for me.
That's so great, and I love that. I mean, for those of you who weren't watching this, the picture that she showed was this beautiful circle rainbow of colors that one of her children drew, and her values are right in the middle of that, right? So even there, it's like surrounded by family, and then those and that impact is huge, and I love that touchstone, like, having something that you can keep touching back to that keeps you grounded, that keeps you really focused on, for the sake of, "What am I doing this?" And having that be the guiding force, and I know for me when we were doing the TED Talks, when the producer we worked with and one of the, sponsors came up to me and said, "Oh my gosh, after listening to your talk, I know how to talk to my family about this, and I haven't been able to do that." I thought, "Oh, wow, my work is complete." Like, it's like that's what the whole purpose was to open up that possibility for people,
Yes.
and you're
Like,
doing that,
write
and
that down
y
and put it somewhere that you can keep coming back to it in those hard
yes.
times. Like, Yes.
So great. So please, like, your book is right behind you. Why don't you say a little bit about the book and
Yes.
like, who would be a good person to pick up the book and read it? Like, is it like,
It
you know,
says for working women. I mean, it is written for professional women, and I would say it is for any leader who wants to be a better leader and improve their workplace culture. I just led 2 workshops in Atlanta on Friday, and I had men showing up to these kind of women's focused workshop, and I asked one of the guys why he was there, and he said, because at least half my workforce is women, and what type of leader would I be if I didn't understand their experience? And I was like,
oh, did you put
oh
that in
my
your
gosh.
folder?
Oh my gosh. Like what? I mean, I was like, then you're already an incredible leader, but it is for people who are very
Yes.
much looking for a new way of work. If you're like fed up, overwhelmed, overly stressed, overly exhausted, and looking for solutions that you can have kind of on an everyday individual, like here are things you can start doing tomorrow, as well as here are ways that we can actually start reshaping the workforce and the research behind a new playbook that makes work better for everyone. So I think it's relevant for, the 4 billion-ish people in the global workforce, but, professional women who are looking for something better is the place I would start.
Or conscious leaders like that gentleman that you just mentioned too. I
Yes,
think that's great.
yes.
So the book's called This Isn't Working, which I think is a great title.
You're like, you should say the title of your book. Yes, yes, it is. This isn't working. How working women can overcome stress, guilt, and overload to find true success. Meghan French Dunbar. Yes, thank you for
Yeah, of
that.
course. And if people want to find you, what's the best way for them to locate you, to have you come speak
Yeah.
or train their workforce?
Thank you. My website, meganfrenchdunbar.com, or LinkedIn is always a great place to find me. I'm pretty active over there. I think I'm the only Meghan French Dunbar in the world that I know of. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Well, in that world anyway. Yeah. And if you go there, you can. I think you posted the link to your TED Talk, right? I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure I saw that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So thank you so much for your time and joining us and really exploring wealth coherence and what true success can actually look like for us.
Thank you, Emily. I love what you are doing, and I'm so thrilled that we got to know each other in the way that we did.
Me too. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Wealth Coherence. If it resonated, I'd love for you to share it or leave a review. This will help others find their way to this space. And if you're ready to keep exploring what it means to live, lead, and give from a place of coherence, head to emilybouchard.com to stay connected. Until next time, be well internally and allow your external life to be the fullest expression of who you truly are.